All right. Welcome everyone to Math 154. This is week 8, lecture 1. Honestly, we're not going to get through very much material today. We're going to spend most of the day talking about the midterm and the project, which are on the horizon. But before we get to those details, some due dates on the horizon. MyMathLab 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4. 3.2 should be pretty much due, if not already, for you if you're watching this. 3.3 and 3.4 pushed out a little more. We'll be finishing 3.4 in today's lecture, so that would be due a week from this class. Excel, your next Excel is going to be 4.1 budget. Now, you might get a little confused with this one. If you see a 4.2 next to it, it's the same thing. It says something like 4.1 and then semicolon 4.2 or 4-2 maybe. But either way, you will find that due date in MyMathLab, of course. So 4.1 budget is your next file. So be aware of that. We will be discussing the project in great detail later today. That'll be the last thing we do, but it will be the bulk of what we do today. It'll take us about 40 minutes to discuss. And then I mentioned here that your budget dates can be seen in Canvas. So in Canvas, there's a specific category for the project. It should have 2 files in it, more than likely. One of them will be where you can download the assignment and where it has all the dates of when you're supposed to be budgeting and when it's due. And then you'll have the location where you can submit the file and you can see the due date on that file submission. So again, we're going to spend the last 40 minutes of class discussing the project. Before that, we're going to talk about the midterm and we're going to finish out 3.4. So let's talk about the midterm for 3 to 5 minutes. Then we're going to finish 3.4 with the density problem. I said we were holding off one. Then it's project. Again, that's the order we're doing things today. Let's talk about the midterm. Then let's finish 3.4. Then let's talk about the project. Okay, so your midterm is going to cover the first 4 chapters. And it feels kind of weird because it takes us more than half of the semester to finish the first 4 chapters. I alluded to this very early in the semester, if not the first day, that we go through chapters 1 through 4 much slower, and then we pick up the pace, not only because we have to spend a lot of time in chapters 0 and 1 dealing with, the speed bump of learning Excel and some language and some coding aspects, arguably, with these formulas. But then we want to really slowly make sure we build up our idea of proportions, proportional reasoning, especially because in chapters 5, 6, 8, and 9, because we don't do chapter 7 anymore. That idea of proportional reasoning is kind of like the first brick of the building for those later chapters. So yes, it's more than halfway through the semester when you'll actually take the midterm, but it is still considered to be half of the material. So when is the midterm going to be? I'm not saying that yet because we're finishing chapter 3 today, which means we still have 4 more sections to cover. So I'm not ready to give you a date. I would say, 2.5, 3 more weeks of class is about when it would be, but please don't hold me to that. Again, as we get closer to when the midterm will be, you will get your date in the live classes and listed in MyMathLab. But the way I always do things is the midterm will be exactly 1 week after finishing section 4.4 in class. So as soon as I finish lecturing on 4.4, that means the midterm is a week later. It will be 20 to 25 questions. Sometimes I do 20, sometimes I do 25. And a review will be provided as promised day 1 of class. The review will be in MyMathLab under your assignments. The test will be in MyMathLab under assignments. The midterm should be the very, very top assignment. The review itself might be after chapter 4 homework, or it might be at the top. I don't remember off the top of my head, so don't hold me to that, but I always make sure the test is the top assignment. So while the test is only going to be 20 or 25 questions, the review is going to be significantly longer, in the ballpark of 60 questions. So the review will be a downloadable file in Canvas. It is possible that there will be an assignment in MyMathLab, but I usually just do a downloadable assignment in Canvas for this one to keep it a little more generic. So the midterm review, again, will be a downloadable file in Canvas. It should be pretty easy to find in the main shell of Canvas. The review, like I said, is probably going to be 55 or 60 questions. And what I do is, out of that 55 or 60 questions, I basically boil it down to 20 or 25. And notice I said the word basically. I'm not saying exactly. I'm not saying I just take these questions and turn them into midterm questions. There might be one that has a concept of proportions on the midterm review, and then on the midterm you have a problem that also deals with the concept of proportions in the exact same way. Now, maybe the review problem was talking about M&Ms and the test problem is talking about apples and oranges. It doesn't matter. It would be the same concept. So it's not going to be the same numbers. It might be different word choices here and there, but again, the review is going to give you an idea of what material to study more specifically, because there's a lot of things that we've done in this course, especially with the guided activities, that are not going to be issues with the midterm. So you really want to spend a lot of time with this midterm review on top of going back and doing homework problems. Now you might say, well, why are you doing this midterm review in Canvas instead? Because I want you to think a little more for the review. So with the review, all you're going to get is the questions and an answer key. So I give you the questions and you get an answer key, but you're responsible for everything in between. The review is not an assignment you have to turn in, so don't worry about that aspect. So if you don't do the review, that's your prerogative, but you will find the midterm much more difficult because you will have not had that focus, that ability to focus on, oh, okay, I know I don't need to do this because I didn't see it on the review. I know I don't need to do this because I didn't see it on the review. That's what the review can be helpful for. Now you might say, oh, all right, Mr. Beckner, I got the question and the answer and I don't know how to get it. What do I do? Well, go back to your homework because more than likely there's a homework problem somewhere in those 4 chapters that is similar, if not the same as the review problem. And then you would have those guided solutions that help me solve this, to view an example, something like that. So the review is not giving you all of those tools, but you still have that resource. You have the ability to research, to dig, and find them, because that is an important issue in this course. The midterm itself is going to be available for 2 days only. So this is with these online courses, assuming you're taking this online. It's not just going to be the midterm is that one day. We will not take the midterm in class. We will hold a regular class that week after finishing 4.4. So we will hold regular class. We will not be testing during class in an online format. You take the test when you're ready. And you only get 12 minutes to take this test. Kidding, 120 minutes. So that's 2 full hours. I don't usually give 2 full hours. This is usually an hour and 15 minutes or an hour and a half. But I'm being generous here because I know we're dealing with situations. So I'm just giving you a little extra time here. So the midterm will be in MyMathLab. You go under assignments. It should be the top assignment. Only the 2 days that it's available. You won't see it before and you won't see it after under assignments. It'll still be in your grade book later though. Now, please understand this last bit because this is arguably the most critical component. You don't take a quantitative reasoning test without showing work. You are going to have to show your work for some of these questions. Maybe you don't need to show your work for number 3. Maybe you don't need to show your work for 17, and that's okay. And I'm just throwing random numbers out here. That's okay, but if maybe you think you were deserving of partial credit, if you don't show me any work, you're never going to get partial credit. So you have to submit your work. And if you don't submit your work within 15 minutes of completion, so to make sure that there's no funny business going on, so you can take pictures with your cell phone or you can scan it, however you need to do that, make sure you are able to immediately after finishing. Because if I go in and I find that you finished your test at 10 a.m. and you submitted your work at, say, 2 p.m., I'm going to overwrite your grade with a 0 because you did not follow my instructions, and I am serious here. So no work, no test grade. If your work is submitted late, no test grade. Make sure this is done in a timely manner. Now, I just mentioned partial credit because I'm a big fan of partial credit with tests because, you know, maybe it takes you 5 steps to do a problem and you did steps 1, 2, 4, and 5 correct. MyMathLab says you did everything wrong, so it takes 5 points from you. But you know you did steps 1, 2, 4, and 5 correct. and you showed your work and you took a picture of it and you submitted it in Canvas in a timely manner. And what do? Well, you email your teacher and you say, hey, Mr. Beckner, I think for questions 3, 10, and 17, I have good work. I just got the answer wrong. Could you take a look at my work? And I'll go, sure. And then I look at it and I go, yeah, here, I found partial credit on these or full credit on these or whatever. So this also works if maybe you have a typo in your answer. Maybe you put an extra decimal point somewhere, or just a random symbol somewhere, or maybe you rounded inappropriately. So that's another thing you could say, hey, we'll check my work, check out question number 11, and then I can do that. But if you don't email me and tell me which questions to check out, I'm not going to just go and give partial credit. You have to take the initiative here and say, Mr. Beckner, questions 3, 9, 19, whatever. Please take a look at my work. I think I deserve partial credit. Or, hey, I think I just goofed and typed something wrong, whatever. I put a K in there in the middle of my number 507. I wrote 50K7. First of all, please be very careful when you're doing this so that this is not an issue. Typos happen, but we want to minimize that. Okay. So where do you find the midterm? In MyMathLab. Where do you take the midterm? In MyMathLab. What do you do while you're taking the midterm? You're showing your work. You're numbering your problems. You're having this nice and neat and organized. If I go and look at your work and it's a big old mess and your problems aren't numbered, I reserve the right to not give you partial credit. They don't have to be in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can have question 6, then question 4, then question 20, and then question 1, as long as they're numbered and organized, as long as you're not writing in a spiral, as long as I can understand your handwriting, as long as you're clear and concise. Now, when you're typing your answers, just like with your homework, if the answer is 5 marbles, you probably just have to type the 5. You probably don't have to write 5 marbles. So please be careful there. I know I try to emphasize that whole be a quantitative reasoning student. It's not just the number that's important, it's the units that is important as well. But MyMathLab, more often than not, goes ahead and puts those units in there for you. So please make sure you don't type 4 marbles when they already have the word marbles up there for you. It's something I can give credit for, but I'd like to not have to do this for 100 students all at once. Yeah, so I think that's all I need to say about the midterm. We know our assignments coming up. MyMathLab, Excel, no quiz mentioned for this particular lecture. And like I said, after we cover 3.4, we will get into these project details, which will take us about 35 or 40 minutes. So with that being said, let us go ahead and get into 3.4. Give me about 15 seconds.
So we've done everything from chapter 3 except for density, and here we are. So density is a ratio. Oh my, a ratio? What is that? I've never seen a ratio before in my life. Well, that's just a bold-faced lie if you're in this class. Ratio, fraction. So density is a fraction. As I've said, everything from chapters 2, 3, and 4 on one level or another is some type of ratio. A lot of these ratios end up being proportions. We kind of extended the idea of proportions into things that we say we can't really do the fraction equals a fraction, but we can at least still relate them to each other. But another ratio, what is this the ratio of? It's not just apples to oranges, it's not students to teachers, it's specifically talking about an object's mass to its volume. Now, I want to kind of point out here that very often we'll actually use weight to volume. And you might be thinking, well, Mr. Beckner, weight and mass are the same thing. And that is not true, but it's also my point that most people feel like mass and weight are the same thing. Now, as long as we stay on planet Earth, your mass would have a direct correlation to your weight, and it would be consistent no matter what part of Earth you're on. But if we go to another planet, your mass would actually stay the same, but your weight would change, because weight is affected by the gravitational constant of the planet you're on. For instance, Earth is 9.8 meters per second squared. Now you might go, meters per second squared, aren't things usually in meters per second? Good observation. Meters per second is a speed. Meters per second squared is an acceleration. So that gravitational force value, that constant of 9.8 meters per second squared, is not a speed, it's an acceleration. Now, we don't have to worry about what that means. That's not the point of this. I'm just trying to say that that number, that 9.8, if you go to the moon, it's lower. If you go to Mars, it's kind of in between Earth and the moon. If you went to Saturn, it would be much larger. If you were ridiculously close to the sun, it would be in the thousands or tens of thousands or millions, or I don't even honestly know, because I'm not trying to go stand too close to the sun. I'm not Icarus. So again, while your mass and your weight are technically two different values with two different types of units, and one of them is affected by the planet you're on, we kind of use them interchangeably. So when you're in England and you say, oh, I weigh 100 kilograms, that's a mass. But when you're in America and you say that I weigh 220 pounds, that's a weight. So the American system is a weight, but the non-American system, the thing that everybody else uses, is a mass. So that is the reason that I feel like most people find these two to be interchangeable. And you're probably not ever going to leave planet Earth in your lifetime. Notice I said probably. I can't make giant assumptions, but statistically it's probably true. So you're gonna be like, well, mass and weight are the same thing to me. In fact, one country uses mass and another country uses weight. So why aren't they interchangeable? So again, if you're gonna be in a science class, I would not be doing this, but in a QR class for just a concept of a ratio of something that measures your mass or weight to your volume, which is the amount of space you take up, or an object. It doesn't have to be you yourself. So that's just the ratio. So if they give you a measurement in feet or inches or miles, not cubic units like cubic feet, cubic inches, cubic miles, which is volume is always measured in, you're going to have to convert them. Now, this is pretty rare in most instances in the real world. If I give you some oddly shaped object, I would probably have to tell you what its volume is because you're not going to know the formula to find the volume of that shape. But in our class, I can say, oh, here's a cube or here's a box with these three dimensions, and then you could find the volume by just using an appropriate formula. So I will admit this is not super necessary unless you're going between cubic inches to cubic feet if they ask for a change like that. But I still want to remind us of the way we convert things that way. You can cube both sides of the conversion factor, or you can also just multiply by the same factor 3 times, as we saw in 3.1. So again, not really going to focus on this issue here, although you'll think we are because you see this thing just says 2 feet. It doesn't say 2 cubic feet. And that's because it's what I alluded to earlier. We're only measuring one side, and it is a cube. Okay. So let's get to the example. A box of supplies weighs 42 pounds. So we've got some box, and hold on, that pen's being weird. We got some box. We'll leave a little space for the actual problem. Here's our box. Now, I'm going to assume this is a cubic box because it says if the box has equal dimensions on all sides. Now, you might be like, Mr. Beckner, that doesn't look like a cube. Please ignore my poor artistic ability. It's a cube. So this box weighs 42 pounds in total. The whole thing is 42 pounds. So if you put that box on a scale, it comes out to 42 pounds exactly. Now this box has equal dimensions, and we get out our measuring tape and we measured one side to be 2 feet. So if you go from end to end, so again from here to here, that height would be 2 feet. Or you could go from end to end horizontally, and this width would be 2 feet from end to end. Or if you measured this distance right here, this distance would also be 2 feet. So it's 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. And I know this doesn't look like 2 in comparison to this, and that's because we're looking at this box mostly from a forward perspective. So we're just barely peeking around the corner to see that it's an actual 3-dimensional shape here. All right, so the box has equal dimensions. And they say, what is the density of the box? And I say, note, you still need to convert your units, but it's not going to feel like a conversion problem. It's just going to feel like finding a volume, because the density is the ratio of mass to volume or weight to volume. We're going to use weight. Again, this is not technically true, but good enough for a QR sake. So again, I said you have to convert your units, but that's just because we got to find the volume based on the fact that it's a 2 by 2 by 2 box. So the first thing we're going to do is find the volume, which is 2 feet times 2 feet times 2 feet. How do I know that? Because the volume of a cube is length times width times height. That is a geometric formula I do expect you to know. The volume of a box is length times width times height. I'm not going to ask you to memorize the volume of a sphere or a cone or a three-dimensional triangle or any kind of, or pyramid. I don't know why I said triangle. Pyramid. I'm not going to ask you to memorize any of those goofy shapes, but you do need to understand the basic concept of two-dimensional and three-dimensional shapes. Area for a rectangle is length times width. Volume for a box, length times width times height. Now check this out. The 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And some person might say this is 8 feet, and it's wrong, because you have feet times feet times feet, which is feet cubed. It's like having 3 times 3 times 3 is 3 cubed, or x times x times x is x cubed. So that's it. There's our volume. So how do we find the density? The density is just the ratio of mass or weight, whichever you're given. Again, technically it's only mass, but in here we can use weight as we're about to do. So how do I know which way to divide them? Do I do weight divided by volume, or do I do volume divided by weight? The formula says the volume goes on the bottom. If you do these backwards, it's wrong. Volume must go on the bottom. So the 8 feet cubed, or 8 cubic feet, must go on the bottom. And the weight, which we said was 42 pounds, or the mass if we had it in, say, kilograms, was the 42 pounds. Again, like I said, it's very interesting because pounds is a weight, but kilograms is a mass. Your mass in kilograms is the same on the moon, is the same on Jupiter, is the same on Mars, is the same on Earth, but your weight in pounds would be different because they take into account the gravity. I know it's weird, just go with it. So we do 42 divided by 8, and let's see how, if we have to round it all. Spoilers, we won't. We get 5.25. So 5.25 is the answer, right? Maybe if we're not a quantitative reasoning student, no. As a quantitative reasoning student, that's wrong. 5.25 what? 5.25 oranges, 5.25 bobs, 5.25 oranges per bob? No, it's 5.2, that's an ugly 2, isn't it? 5 pounds per cubic foot. Or you could write with the word 5.25 lbs per cubic foot. Hello. That looks like a 2, but it's a 3. I had some gunk on my tablet, apparently. So there's our answer. Again, either of these is perfectly fine. Both mean the same thing, whether you write the units in fraction form or with a per form. So what does this mean? What is the point of this problem? What's the uniqueness of finding a density, or what's the reasoning to find a density? I don't know why I said uniqueness. Let's say this box was filled of just one object. It's filled with a bunch of marbles or something like that, or a bunch of sand, or I don't know, a bunch of very hollow beads, whatever. So this box is filled to the brim with the substance, and you go, well, I just hurt my back, so I don't really want to carry 42 pounds right now. But this is 2 by 2 by 2. What if I were to maybe slice this box? So I'm going to slice this box like so. Be careful this way. So that each of these little red boxes is 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. So again, this right here, each of these, oops, I got a little crazy on that one, didn't I? Just trying to emphasize, this little cube right here, which of course has you wanted to see through the cube, there's the whole thing. That's a 1 by 1 by 1. And there would be 8 of these. There's 1 here, 2, 3, 4 in the face. And then on the back side, there's 1, 2, and then 3, and then 4 behind it. So there would be 8 of these little 1 by 1s. 1 by 1 by 1. And each would have 5.25 pounds in it. That's what you can do with the concept of a density. You can break this down into smaller things. Now, do you have little 1 by 1 by 1 boxes? Because you certainly can't just take an open box and go from a 2 by 2 by 2 to a 1 by 1 to 8 of these 1 by 1 by 1s. You'd have to have 8 1 by 1 by 1 boxes. But again, let's say 42 pounds is too much for you to handle with your back and this, bigger, more awkward 2 by 2 by 2 box. So you go, all right, well, let me instead buy 8 smaller boxes, fill them up with this equally distributed object, and then you'll have 8 boxes with 5.25 pounds. And if you took 8 times 5.25, guess what you get? 42 pounds. That kind of goes in line with that concentration idea that whether you have 1 box with 42 pounds that's 2 by 2 by 2, or 8 boxes that are 1 by 1 by 1, 5.25 pounds in each, you still have the total amount of the thing at the end of the day. Now, if you're filling these boxes with DVDs and weights and water jugs and things that are not equally distributed, you'd have a much harder time doing this equally, but you could at least still say, let me go get 8 boxes and just try and put about 5 pounds in each, and then everything would be, again, much easier to carry on your poor old back or young back with maybe you had an accident, I don't know, lifting too much weight at the gym from all that protein powder from a chapter ago. So densities of objects in the real world are not always equally distributed, like I said. If you have a box full of beads or sand or something like that, it's all the same thing and it's filled to the top, then that's an equal distribution of weight most likely. But if you've got a box with a 10-pound dumbbell in it and a calculator in it, you're not going to be able to equally distribute those weights if you try and put it in 2 boxes, 1 box with the 10-pound dumbbell and 1 with the, what did I say, a calculator, I think? Obviously, the calculator box is going to be lighter because those weights don't have the same densities. Think about it like a balloon versus a bowling ball. You could have a balloon the size of a bowling ball, but the bowling ball is a lot denser. The material inside of it is heavier. So even though they're the same size, they have different densities because their sizes, while the same, their weights or masses are different. So the bowling ball is denser, whereas that balloon is very, very, very not dense. All right. So with that said, that will close out chapter 3.
Just give me a second. I'm setting up for our project discussion.
Right. So I want to take a solid amount of time and talk about our project. Now, I know this is project 1. It could be our only project. It could be one of multiple projects. It just depends how the course is going. And I would have said this to you. You will find your due date in the intro of a live lecture, as well as in Canvas, and the Canvas due date will be the whole time. This talk is just to keep things a little more generic for my various classes, since I teach this more than once each semester. So let's see what we got here. Each student is responsible for creating a monthly budget of all of their expenses for the month of, and just a couple words I might have to take out for the month assigned. Now, it does not have to be a specific month. Now, you notice that I had November written there. So once in the past, it was the month of November. I've done the month of February. I've done the month of June. I've done split months, like, say, January 16th to February 15th, or December 20th through January 19th, something like that. So that will also be something that is detailed in Canvas and in the intro. You'll find this file in Canvas where it will have your exact dates. So each student is responsible for creating a monthly budget of all their expenses for the month assigned. And again, it doesn't have to be just a February. It could be a split month, like we said, March 15th to April 14th, something like that, maybe. If you do not spend money regularly, you need to ask your parents or your spouse or whoever you have close to you who is basically giving you the financial assist what they are spending on you each day. Now, some parents or spouses or brothers or whatever might consider this to be nosy, and they don't want to tell you these numbers, and that's the lifestyle that they choose to live. I would love for all of us to be in a society where we can openly talk about our finances a little more, but I'm also not going to tell anybody what to actually do with their lives, as you already know. So, besides do your homework, that's what I will tell you. So if you are in a situation where someone does not want to tell you what they're spending on you, then you can see I have an all caps the sentence after that. Just make up your own numbers if absolutely necessary. I'm not going to be grading this based on, oh, you spent too much on video games this month, or you spent too much on your car, or you spent too much on this, or too much on that, or too much on this, or you didn't spend enough on this. That's not what the grade is going to be about. The grade will have absolutely nothing to do with the expenses. The grade will be based around, did you do the 6 things that I asked for that we'll slowly go over? Did you use Excel formulas appropriately? Did all of the calculations, add out correct, multiply out correct, whatever operations they're supposed to be doing? Did you make your charts? Did you make an analysis? That's what you're going to be graded on. I don't care if I have student A who has $10,000 worth of expenses in a month and student B who's got $10 worth of expenses in a month. That's not what's being graded on. Again, it's, did you actually do this task? What the purpose of this is for you to have something that you can use the next month and the next month and the next month and the next month to keep a good record for yourself, to understand where your money is going and where it's coming from each and every month, as well as to I don't want to say introduce the idea of prorated expenses, but to kind of get you used to them as well. So again, this is not going to be graded on the fact that oh man, you only bought 7 things this month, or you bought 200 things this month. That's not what's graded on, although I do have some minimums, as we'll see. Rows should be the days of your month. Columns should be your different categories. The furthest right column should be your total daily expense. Now remember, rows are horizontal, columns are vertical. You have to get this right. Every semester I get maybe 1, maybe 2 students who get this wrong, and you get punished in the point department because of that. So row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, row 6, column A, column B, column C, column D. So again, what we've said, let me just kind of shrink this so we can see a little bit of everything. Sure, there we go. Rows should be the days of your month. Row 1, row 2, row 3, you can see those. Columns should be your different categories. Column A, column B, column C, column D. So if your project was supposed to start on, say, December 1st and end on December 31st, which I would never have done because that would be over a break for standard semesters, but let's just say that would be the case, then you're probably not going to start in this block, because you're going to have a column of labels and a row of labels for these things. So actual data doesn't really, like numbers and things, won't get put into until you get into like this section and further right and further down, of course. But again, you must have your rows and columns labeled appropriately. If they're flip-flopped, you will be penalized for that. And it won't be a small penalty either, because, I mean, this is 2 of 6 issues of the whole thing. So I could arguably take up to about 20 points for that. Okay, if you have more than 19 categories. So what's a category? Well, a category is what you decide to call it. I'm not going to say that everyone has to have a category called rent. I'm not going to say that everybody has to have a category called mortgage, because some of you have rents and some of you have mortgages. You could just, call it roof if you want to. I'm not going to sit here and analyze the name of the category just to make sure that you have something that represents, well, you should be paying for, quote, roof somewhere, probably, unless you've inherited a house. And if you have, you still have your taxes and insurance. So you could, still call that, quote, roof or rent or mortgage or house payment or whatever you like. So if you have more than 19 categories, because some of us have lots of various expenses, and especially if you decide to have a category for fast food, a category for dining out, a category for grocery bills, another person might just have one category and call the whole thing food and lump all 3 of those together. Some of you might just have a category for groceries and then another category for all other eating. So eating at McDonald's or eating at Olive Garden or eating at, I don't know, I was going to try and think of some nice little local spot, but it doesn't really matter. So again, one student might have 3 different categories of food, another student might have 2 categories of food, another student might have just 1 category of food, but everyone better have a category of food because we all got to eat. And food is not free. All right, so if you end up with more than 19 categories, I don't need you to go into 20, 30, 40 different categories because then your Excel spreadsheet is going to get really, really wide. So just call the last one, the 20th one, miscellaneous, and then lump everything else into that. And again, I don't necessarily care how you're dividing this out. I don't care if the food category is before the rent category or vice versa. It's just if you end up needing more than 19 categories, call the 20th one miscellaneous, and then just lump everything in there. Whenever you have a miscellaneous expense, if you could, to the right of that total daily expense, you could just make a little memo and say, hey, this miscellaneous expense was for, I don't know, paper clips, or this miscellaneous expense was for a calculator. I don't know. Some of you, I would say probably half of you maybe won't even have this miscellaneous category because you'll only have 10 or 12. Please note that I say there is a minimum of 6 categories. If you do any less than 6 categories, that's when I start to take away points from your grade. Now you might be saying, Mr. Beckner, I only paid for 3 things this whole month. So make it up then. Again, if you can't meet these minimums or you can't get the information from someone, then just make it up. But understand that in your life, you will be paying for this stuff eventually. So have this sitting to the side, ready to go once you can start building your own expenses and your own budget. So made up numbers are okay for now, but just know that you should try and use this in a real fashion at some point. And by the way, if I haven't already made this clear, I do not care what your numbers are at all. When I go to grade these, I have a method to grade them completely randomly as long as you don't stick your name inside of the Excel file in a cell somewhere. So I'm not going to be sitting here judging you for your expenses or anything like that. Your grades will 100% be based off of completely anonymous information. And again, I'm not going to sit here and go, oh, well, yeah, Alex is spending $400 on this product and Jane is spending $1,000 on that product. And look at Bob, he's spending $100 on lottery tickets every month. Get out of here, Bob. No, that's not what I'm doing. Again, I have no judgment here at all. We are all in different financial positions, and I really do not care about your expense portfolio, your monthly budget, any of that stuff. I just want you to use this for your personal growth. And when you're done with this course, months from now, years from now, if you don't want to use this exact format of an Excel spreadsheet for your budget, go online and find a website that has something that could be helpful. There are a bunch of different budgeting websites out there, and I'm not going to advertise for any of them at this moment, but I'm pretty sure Google could find you one pretty easily, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. So again, for the categories, you can combine some things. We've kind of talked about that food. You can expand some things. It's up to you how specific or non-specific you want to be, as long as you have at least 6 categories. Now, categories can be lots of different things besides food and rent. You have medical expenses, you have vehicle expenses. You could break down the vehicle expenses into multiple categories. You have insurances. Um, I said medical stuff already. You have textbooks you have to buy. You've got courses you have to pay for, um, clothing, food, investments, if you wanted to call that an expense, because it would be paying off a loan, paying off your credit card. You could be a category as well. Okay, so hopefully that clarifies that. Now, if your expenses vary wildly from month to month, which if they don't now, they will at some point in your life, especially if you own a home. Medical expenses, you break a leg, all of a sudden you got a couple $1,000s to pay. You need some fancy surgery, even with insurance, $10,000. So that would be a case of something varying wildly. If you own your own home and you got a really bad leak and you get the inspector out and it turns out he goes, well, this roof is 29 years old and it's seen about 15 hurricanes, it's time to replace this. And then that's, $6,000, 10 grand, 15 grand, depending on your home, depending on whether you're doing the construction or hiring it out, that kind of stuff. So yeah, your January, you might spend $1,000. Your February, you might spend $1,200. Your March, you might spend $800. But then April, that roof bill comes in and your $1,000 monthly bill is now like $1,100 because you got 10 grand on top of that. You might say, well, Mr. Beckner, I'm getting a loan for that. So, that's not going to be technically an expense. Then I just add in that loan payment. Sure, but you could also maybe have saved cash away because these big expenses come up eventually, and then you're able to just conveniently slap 10 grand down on the table, get your new roof, and no loan, no paying 3 or 5 or 10% APR monthly payments for 5 years, 10 years, who knows? And then by the time you get that loan paid down, it's time to slap another roof on the house. Who knows? So what is the point of this ramble, this rant? So if your expenses vary wildly from month to month, consider every possible expense you have. Things like your car insurance, your taxes, your doctor's visits, your prescriptions, your house repairs, car repairs that could be done in quarterly or annually or semi-annually or all sorts of different installments. So car insurance, a lot of people pay this twice a year because if they pay it monthly, they have to pay just a little more. There's basically a premium bump. But if you pay it semi-annually, which means every 6 months or twice per year, then they might save you like $30 or $40, and in the long run, that can be worth it. All right, so if your car insurance comes in January and July, that means you might have like a $400 bill in January, but then nothing February, March, April, May, or June. So it seems like your January expenses are significantly higher, but that's because you're paying this big lump sum in January that's going to cover you for February, March, April, May, June. So let me give a simpler example. Let's say that your car insurance was pretty cheap and it was $360 a month. At least that's cheap relative to someone in their mid 30s and male and doesn't have a horrible track record on the road. Someone else, maybe $720 is cheap. But let's just say you paid $360 for 6 months worth of car insurance. So if you take that $360 and divide it by the number of months it's covered for, so you're doing dollars divided by months, you would get a value per month. It's a simple rate like we talked about in chapter 3. So 360 divided by 6 would be 60. So your $360 you pay in January that covers you through January, February, March, April, May, June, in reality is much more like a $60 expense January, a $60 expense February, a $60 expense March, and 60 in April, 60 in May, and 60 in June. You just have to front the cost. So for myself, if I were the student doing this monthly budget and I have my own monthly budgets and this is exactly how I do it, I would not say that I paid $360 in January. I would say I paid $60 in January. And then in my February budget, I would have that $60 allocated. In March, I would have that $60 allocated, and I would have, quote, prorated car insurance. Now, again, in reality, when that bill comes, yes, I'm $360 broker in January and then again in July, but we set that cash aside throughout the previous 5 months. That way, when we're ready to pay it, it doesn't feel like it's a big deal. And then over the next 5 months, we build that $360 back up so that we can pay the $360 again in July. And then through July and then July through December, we save another $360 to pay it in January. Vehicles, staying in this realm, okay, you drive your car for 5 years, 10 years, whatever. All of a sudden, you need a new timing belt or timing chain after 100,000 miles or whatever your vehicle might require. And they go, oh, okay, well, if you're going to do the timing belt, we might as well do the water pump while we're in here for most cars. And all of a sudden, you've got a $1,000 or $1,500 vehicle expense. And you go, oh no, well, I wasn't expecting this. What do I do? Well, you consider the fact that you know your car is going to cost you a lot of money at some point. So just like that insurance, you're setting aside maybe $100 a month or $150 a month. And you won't be able to guess this exact number without life experience and being used to the same car. But with practice and manipulation, you can get this whittled down better. So, oh, okay, I'm going to put $100 away a month, $100 away, $100 away, $100 away. Now this is for oil changes and tires and random breakdowns and whatever. So after 3 years of me storing away $100 or you storing away $100, now some of that money's been taken out for oil changes and tires and inspections and whatnot. But then hopefully when it's time to replace that timing belt and water pump and whatever else they're going to fiddle around with, you've got that $1,500 sitting in the bank because you consider these prorated style expenses. And you can say, oh, well, I don't necessarily, yeah, I have this $1,500 expense in the month of March, but in my monthly budget, I've been setting aside 100 or 150 or 80 or however many dollars. So that's what I'm talking about if your expenses vary wildly. Now, some of us, this is not an issue, so don't worry about it. But again, just know that in your future, this is likely to be you as well. The written, now I orally talked about taking a semi-annual car insurance and turning it into monthly. Here you have a vehicle property tax of $240 per year. Now there's 12 months in a year, so you divide by 12, so that gives you $20 per month as a rate. So vehicle property tax is another thing that comes in typically once per year. You're not paying your vehicle property tax monthly unless you're in some weird situation that I have not seen before. If you outright own your own home, you're not making a mortgage payment, which I know is not a lot of people out there, but your taxes come quarterly or every other month or semi-annually, depending on the city. Your insurance bill comes annually. So these are other expenses that you might want to prorate. So I've said that this idea of prorating your expenses is not mandatory, but it is highly recommended for your personal life to consider things like that. So again, prorated expenses, a very, very important concept moving forward in your life, especially for the idea of storing away some acorns for a rainy, cold winter day or something like that. Now, I do say that I need you to list at least one prorated expense in your budget or lose 20 points. I used to actually do an entirely second part of this project, which people messed up more than actually got it right, unfortunately. So I've kind of axed that and just said, all right, you have to put at least one prorated expense in there, and please make sure that I know which one it is. So have a little memo somewhere. It says, hey, this expense on March 1st, or this expense on January 1st, or this expense on August 15th was my prorated expense. So that is a significant point loss if you don't do it. Now, once again, if you don't have any of these expenses, if you are living off of someone else and they won't tell you these numbers, they won't tell you how much your rent is, your portion of rent, what it would be if you were paying it, or how much your gas bill is, or your electric bill, or water bill, or trash bill, or anything like that, just make it up. I don't care. I'm not going to call up your parents and say, did Bob actually spend $25 this month on blah, blah, blah? You can completely lie to me about every single number. Again, that's not what I'm grading you on. All right, so I did mention earlier, I want to pop back up here with the rows and the columns. The rows should be the days of the month, and please make sure the month and the day are labeled. Remember that there are quick ways in Excel to make that progress without having to type out 30 or 31 of those. You just have to do one or maybe two, and then you can use a fill handle probably, depending on how you format things. But I said that the furthest right column should be your total daily expense. So it's another thing, if you miss it, that's significant points lost. So maybe on January 1st, you spent $5 at the corner store, and then you spent $20 on groceries. So there in that total column on the far right column, it should say $25. Now, it shouldn't say $25 because you literally typed 25 there. Remember, total columns in Excel are meant to be used with formulas. You should only have to type one formula for that column and you should be able to fill it down. If you don't do that, you will lose 100% of the points for that total column. So if you're typing a different formula for each row, if you type a formula for January 2nd, and then you type a formula for January 3rd, and then you type a formula for January 4th, that's wrong, 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 wrong. You should have only had, if your month was January, you should have only had to type a formula for the month of January, or sorry, for January 1st, and then just fill it down for the rest of January. Easy as that. Just like we emphasized with the Excel homework. So here's something I need you to understand with that. I might go in your Excel file and completely change your numbers, and I'll say, nah, Bob didn't spend $20 on groceries that day. He spent $25 on this other category. And I'm going to watch your total column and see if it changes. And if it doesn't, then you're in trouble. Or I can just, double click on your formulas and see what they have, and I can instantly tell whether it's right or wrong. But I just need you to understand that. This is supposed to be set up for super easy future use. So when you use this for the next month and the next month and the next month, you just put in, on February 15th, I had $15 of groceries. On February 16th, I spent $40 on my cell phone bill. And then all those totals just change with the snap of a finger. All right. So we said the last column should be a total of daily expenses. Down here on spot number 4, which means number 3 was this. I don't know why that changed. 1, 2, yeah, there we go. 3. So here we are at 4. Your last row should be the sum of each category. The last row should be the sum of each category. So this means I want to see what your monthly expenses are for your groceries. I want to see what your monthly expenses are for your fast food, or I want to see what your monthly car expenses are, however you're labeling your categories. So that way, if you went to the grocery store 5 times on this very last row, you can see how much you spent on groceries that month. Or if you have a column for fast food and you hit up Chick-fil-A, let's say 23 times, you're going to see how much you spent on Chick-fil-A or all your fast food altogether. And then some of these numbers might scare you a little, and that's half of the point of this. Because these small expenses that you might do every day add up. So you'll have a total column and you'll have a total row. The column would be the sum of the days. The total row would be the sum of a category. Next, I want you to create a pie chart, big fan of this for budgets, that will include every expense category with the exception of the sum of daily expenses. We've talked about with pie charts why you don't want to have the regular categories and then a sum category. This was very early in the semester. So your pie chart should just be based on the categories using the totals from part 4. So in other words, you will create your pie chart based off of the last row, which is the sum of each category. So your pie chart is only based off of a single row, the last row, and it's the sum of each category. So that way you'll have a slice for groceries, you'll have a slice for cell phone bill, you have a slice for rent, you'll have a slice for, again, however you're labeling your categories. Now remember, with pie charts, the idea here is that pie charts give you a visual representation of percents. So when you're labeling your pie charts, when you go through that labeling process, make sure they are labeled as as percentages. So in the pie chart, I don't want to see that you spent $1,200 on your rent. I want to see that your rent was 31% of your expenses. I also need to make sure, you need to make sure that your charts are well labeled. So when you have your pie chart, if they just say category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, nope, you're going to lose points for that. It should have, all right, the red one is food, the green one is your rent, the blue one is your car expenses, the orange one is your medical expense. Not those specific colors, the specific categories. You get the point, I hope. So this is the bulk of your work. You got to have your specific days of the month, or months if we split the month, labeled. You've got to have at least 6 categories, You need to have a column for your totals for each day. You need to have a row for the total of each category. You need a pie chart based on that total for each category, labeled appropriately. And then the very last thing we have you do is a quick analysis. And this analysis can go anywhere in the Excel chart. Keep it in the main section of the screen. Just find one cell, click there, and type a sentence, a paragraph, whatever. Please don't just type 2 or 3 words. I at least need a sentence. A paragraph would be cool, but a sentence or 2 is perfectly fine. So make an analysis of your monthly expenses. So this could be you saying, I think I'm putting enough away to my investments or my savings account, or I think I'm spending too much on my Carrera GT or whatever. Maybe I need to spend less on my rent, or maybe I need to spend less on fast food, or maybe I need to spend a little bit more on this category because my clothes are ratty or something. I don't know. Now, I don't need to know any kind of checking account or savings account numbers. This is not a budget where you're starting out with, oh, I've got $500 in my checking account and adding and subtracting that. No, this is just showing you what you've spent in a month. So this is not necessarily having to do with incomes. Now, outside of this course, could you modify it to do that? Yes, absolutely. That would be a great idea to modify that. And then, so you make your spreadsheet and say it took up all this space. And then let's say this was January, and then you say, all right, well, now I want to do this for February. So you use the plus sign, you go back to sheet 1, you can copy all the information there, paste it here. And all you'd really have to do is change your days and months and maybe your categories, I don't know. Delete the old numbers and put your new numbers in. And then that total column should still be adding everything up correctly. Your total row should be still adding up everything correctly. And everything will be fine. And then you can go to March, and then April, and then May, and then June. And I've had students say, well, that's annoying to have to keep copying and pasting. That's less annoying than starting the whole thing over, I'd say. So again, what I really like about this project is that it's going to get you to become aware of what you're spending every month, because I find that most people are not aware of this. And that could enable you to say, oh, well, maybe I'm spending too much on this one category. Like, I will even spoil this one that's very common as, man, if I spend a little more on groceries and cooking at home and a little less on dining out or fast food or Starbucks coffee or anything like that, maybe I could take that money and put it somewhere else, like a savings account or an investment account, or put it towards a future car or a future, anything. Because as we will see in these later chapters, when we really start talking about compound interest, small savings each day, each month, each year over a long period of time, when invested, can turn us into a millionaire with enough time, effort, and knowledge. So that little $3 you might be saving yourself a day, if you can do that for 50 years, you can make bank off of that as long as you're doing the right thing with it. You're not sticking it in a CD, or you're not just leaving it in a 0.01% interest rate checking account, something like that. Okay. Oops, wrong thing. That's not what I wanted. Ignore that. So you will be submitting this in Canvas. You will also find the downloadable file that we were just looking at in Canvas. So when you log into your Canvas shell, I'm in the student view right now, you'll see about halfway down under your quizzes and everything, there's that project category. And if this is not available yet, just give it one more day and it should be available. And obviously yours will not say fall 2020, that is the past. I'm just using this as a visual example, but you'll see 2 main spots in the project. You'll see one spot for the actual file to download. So if I click this, it would take me to the page where I'll see that and be able to download it. And it would be this, except it would have your actual due date here. It will have the specific month that you're going to be working on here. So those details will be seen in the downloadable file of Canvas. Under that link, you will see the link to submit your project here. Now this has to be an Excel file. It cannot be any other fancy spreadsheet file. As we've talked about all semester long, it does need to be an Excel file. This is not auto-graded. I will have to go in and grade these, so it'll probably be a week or week and a half before I get to these because I get a lot of projects all at once and they are time-consuming to grade. So please be patient with me in that regard. But that's where you'll submit it. So you'd click there. And then you hit the button that says submit assignment, and then it'll take you to a screen where you can just upload your file. It's pretty clear. And then the due date, it's back not gonna work. Back didn't work. And then again, your due date, it would be seen here, just so you know. And again, I will always say those due dates at the start of live classes. They can be found inside of Canvas. So hopefully that's not too confusing. Okay, so last time through this really quickly. You'll make a monthly budget. You will have your rows be the days of your month, columns be the different categories. If your rows just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not good enough. Need slightly more detail than just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Columns are your categories. How many categories do you need? At least 6. How do you break them up? However you like. What do you do if you have no expenses? Make them up. What do you do if you're trying to get your parents to tell you your expenses, but they won't? Make them up. If you go online, I'm sure you can find rent prices, home prices, things like that, monthly payments, whether it's $1,000 for this apartment or $1,500 for this house. That could help you get a ballpark idea. Now, let's say you live in a house of 4 people and the rent is $1,600 a month. What you could do is you could prorate that to yourself. So you could say, all right, it's $1,600 a month for 4 people. That means my quote portion of the rent would be $400, 1,600 divided by 4. So you could do something like that. Again, if you're a kid or a brother, spouse, or sister in a situation where you're not earning income, and again, someone doesn't want to actually tell you the numbers. We said that I would love for you to try and prorate some of your expenses, but I did say you must list at least one prorated expense and mention somewhere in the Excel file which one it is. That's a significant point loss if you don't. You have to have your sum column, which is the sum of the days. You have to have your sum row, which is the sum of categories. You have to make your pie chart. That has to be listed as percentages, not dollar values. That chart has to be labeled, not just 1, 2, 3, 4. It has to be labeled rent, food, car, health, whatever. And then somewhere you have to just make a sentence to paragraph analysis of your monthly expenses. I'm not going to take away points if I disagree with your analysis. I'm just going to say, hey, did they write a sentence or a paragraph? Did they actually look at the information they have? All right, cool, full credit. That should be the easiest of these 6 sections to get complete. So again, you'll find your due dates in Canvas. Typically, this is about 5 to 6 weeks after it being assigned. So just please understand that. If we're live, like I said, I will tell you those due dates at the beginning and or end of the class if I don't mention it right now. And if you have any questions, you can always email me about this, but I think everything should be pretty clear and concise. Make sure this is your own work. Make sure you are starting with a fresh Excel file. Do not go to the internet and try and download something and copy paste it. Things will look weird. I'm not grading on like colors and bolding and shading and borders or anything like that. So, just gonna put some numbers up here. So Bob turns in his Excel file and he's got everything labeled up here. Everything looks good. And it's just that the whole point here is just the numbers are not bolded, they're not accentuated, they're not colored or anything like that. That's not what I'm grading on. Bob would get 100 if all the formulas are correct, everything's labeled appropriately, they've met the minimum standards. Okay, so Jane does this. Jane has different numbers, but I don't feel like changing them. But Jane decides that she wants everything gridded like this. Okay, I don't care. I'm not grading on that. And then maybe Alex comes in and he decides that he wants this column to be orange, and then he wants this column to be yellow, and he wants this column to be green. Again, I'm not going to be grading on that. You're not being graded on anything having to do with color, outlining, bolding, shading, none of that stuff. You're graded on all the details I have talked about on that sheet. And again, you can download this sheet from Canvas. So hopefully we all understand what is necessary. All right, so that will be the end of the project discussion.
All right, so again, just got your couple of homeworks that have been previously assigned, as well as the new 3.4 homework, the new 4.1 Excel budget. We covered your project details, we covered the midterm details. Obviously, both of these major things are on the horizon, but we want to start working on that project as soon as possible. So if you have any questions, please email me. Besides that, we'll see you next time for Week 8, Lecture 2. Take care.